She'd killed
You think you can just
17
sit here
enemy
and ignore me?
combatants in Helmand
Give me
province.
that.
The three men outside the Carolina bar didn't know they were about to become casualties. 18, 19, and 20. Staff Sergeant Kira Blackwood could still smell burning fuel when she closed her eyes. 8 years hadn't erased the memory. October 2017, Sangin Valley, Afghanistan. The MRAP's interior lit orange with flame metal groaning as ammunition cooked off somewhere in the wreckage. She'd crawled through a window opening barely wider than her shoulders, found Specialist Ethan Rourke trapped beneath collapsed metal, his leg twisted at an angle that meant severed artery, before she even checked pulse. She'd done everything right. Tourniquet applied in 11 seconds. Needle decompression for the tensioned pneumothorax threatening to collapse his remaining lung. Her hands steady despite the heat, despite the sound of rounds cooking off, despite knowing the whole vehicle could detonate any second. Rourke's eyes found hers in that flickering orange light. Blood bubbled at the corners of his mouth when he tried to speak. "The brakes failed," he whispered. Each word cost him. "Blackwood, check the fucking hydraulics. Tell them." His pulse faded under her fingers at 1847 hours local time. 24 years old. Silver Star recipient for pulling another Ranger clear before the flames took him. Dead because something failed that should never have failed. The Army gave her a medal too, pinned it on her chest and told her she was a hero. They didn't mention that heroes still woke up at 0430 with the smell of burning fuel in their nostrils and the memory of a dying man's last words echoing in the dark. March 2025, Fort Liberty, North Carolina. 8 years and 4 months since Sangin. Kira woke in her barracks room with her hand already reaching for the Glock 19 she kept in the quick-access safe beside her bed. Old habits. The kind that kept you alive downrange, but made you a ghost stateside. She stared at the ceiling in the pre-dawn dark, counting her breaths the way the therapist had taught her. 4 seconds in, hold 4, 4 seconds out. It didn't stop the memories. Nothing stopped the memories, but it kept her from putting her fist through the wall. Laurel 4 or 5 hours. 45 minutes before she needed to be at Division Support Battalion for another 12-hour shift processing equipment inventories. She rose, made her bed with hospital corners tight enough to bounce a quarter, and went through the morning ritual that had kept her sane for 8 years. Push-ups, sit-ups, shower, check her EDC setup. Glock 19 with 2 spare magazines. Benchmade folder clipped inside her pocket. Streamlight flashlight. Phone. Keys. The same items in the same pockets every single day because consistency was control and control was survival. She studied herself in the mirror. 28 years old, but her eyes looked 50. Auburn hair pulled back tight in a regulation bun, sharp green eyes that tracked everything, exits and threats and spacing between bodies. A scar ran from her right eyebrow into her hairline, pale against tan skin. Another on her left forearm that looked like a badly healed burn. If anyone saw her without the uniform, they'd find the shrapnel scars across her back and ribs. The kind of damage that came from pulling wounded soldiers out of burning vehicles while taking fire. The scars on her body were just marks. The real damage was deeper. Division Support Battalion occupied a series of warehouses on the western edge of Fort Liberty. Kira arrived at 0530 before most of the day shift and let herself into the logistics office with her access card. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Rows of computer terminals glowed in the semi-darkness. She logged into the logistics information warehouse and pulled up the day's tasking. MRAP parts inventory. Again. She'd been doing this for 6 months since transitioning from active duty to reserve status. Counting parts. Cross-referencing serial numbers. Processing requisitions. It was mind-numbing work that let her autopilot through the day without thinking too much, which was exactly why she'd requested it. No decisions. No lives depending on her. Just numbers and databases and the comfortable numbness of routine. Except today, the numbers wouldn't add up. She was cross-referencing brake assembly requisitions when she noticed the discrepancy. Part number NSN 253001 XXXXX. The Max Pro MRAP Brake Master Cylinder Assemblies. Recalled in August 2016 for hydraulic line degradation. The recall had gone out to every FOB in Afghanistan. Standard procedure pull. The defective assemblies replaced them with updated versions document the swap. Except the documentation showed 17 FOBs had never completed the recall. The old assemblies with the degraded hydraulic lines had stayed in service. And those 17 FOBs had reported 23 equipment failure incidents between September 2016 and December 2017. Brake failures, steering failures, hydraulic system collapses. Kira's photographic memory kicked in without conscious effort. She'd spent 2 deployments staring at part numbers and maintenance logs. She remembered the MRAP she'd pulled Rourke from, remembered the inspection report she'd seen afterward during the investigation. Part number NSN 2530-01XX, the recalled brake assembly, still installed 30 days after the recall order. Her hands started shaking. She set them flat on the desk and breathed. 4 seconds in, hold, 4 seconds out. Someone had signed off on that inspection. Someone had cleared that vehicle as mission capable despite knowing the brakes were degraded. Someone had sent Rourke and his team into Sangan in a vehicle that was one hard stop away from catastrophic failure. She pulled up the inspection report, scanned down to the signature line. W. Merrick, Vanguard Solutions, 15 September 2017. The name hit her like a fist. Wade Merrick, former 75th Ranger Scout dishonorably discharged in 2009 for equipment theft. She'd heard the stories. Merrick had been promising talented until he'd been caught selling night vision equipment to private buyers. Court-martialed, kicked out. Last she'd heard, he'd gone private contractor. Vanguard Solutions. She dug deeper into the database, fingers flying across the keyboard, pulled maintenance logs from all 17 FOBs that never completed the recall, 23 equipment failures, 34 casualties, 13 KIA. Every single inspection report bore the same signature. Merrick, Vanguard Solutions. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright suddenly, the walls too close. She could smell burning fuel, could hear Rourke's voice. The brakes failed. Tell them. She'd spent 8 years trying to tell them. 8 years filing reports and answering questions and testifying at investigations that went nowhere. The Army had ruled it combat loss. IED attack complicated by equipment failure. No negligence, no fault, just the fog of war. Except now she had 17 FOBs and 34 casualties and one name on every failed inspection. Her phone buzzed, text from her father. Haven't heard from you this week. Everything okay? She stared at the message. Command Sergeant Major Garrett Blackwood, retired, 30 years as a Ranger. Grenada, Panama, Gulf War. The toughest man she'd ever known, and the one person who understood what it meant to carry ghosts. She typed back. Need to blow off steam. Heading to the Iron Anchor tonight. His response came immediately. Be careful. Call if you need me. She didn't tell him about the brake assemblies. Didn't tell him about Merrick's signature on Rourke's death warrant. He'd spent 30 years teaching her to be a warrior. Now she needed to figure out how to be a warrior in a world where the enemy wore contractor badges and killed with paperwork instead of bullets. The Iron Anchor sat 2 miles outside Fort Liberty in Fayetteville, North Carolina. A cinder block dive with a gravel parking lot and a neon sign that had been flickering since 2003. It was 2030 on a Saturday, and the place was packed with soldiers from the 82nd Airborne, most of them blowing off steam after a week of jump operations. Kira wore jeans and a faded gray PT shirt, her auburn hair pulled back tight. She'd come here alone after her shift ended, not looking for trouble, just trying to disappear into the noise for an hour before heading back to her empty apartment. She ordered a beer from the bartender and found a spot at the corner of the bar with her back to the wall and her eyes on the door. Old habits. The bartender was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with gray stubble and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in uniform. He set the beer in front of her and studied her with the practiced assessment of a senior NCO. You're Blackwood, he said. Not a question. She looked at him. Do I know you, Donovan Kirsch, retired SFC, served with your father in Gulf War? He extended a hand. Saw your Silver Star ceremony on the news. Hell of a thing you did in Sangan. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, calloused. That was 8 years ago. Some things don't fade. He gestured around the bar. You picked a good night to visit. Quiet, relatively speaking. Most of the 82nd is still in the field. She took a pull from her beer and didn't answer. Kirsch seemed to understand. He moved down the bar to serve other customers, leaving her to her thoughts. She'd been nursing the same beer for 40 minutes when the 3 men walked in. They moved with the swagger of contractors. expensive tactical pants and shirts that screamed private security. The loud one leading was tall, maybe 6'2", with a shaved head and shoulders that suggested serious gym time. The other two flanked him like wingmen. They scanned the bar the way operators scanned a room looking for threats and targets. Their eyes settled on Kira. The tall one said something to his friends. They laughed. Then he headed straight for her. Kira tracked his approach in her peripheral vision, assessed him automatically. 215 pounds probably. Strong, but his stance was sloppy weight too far forward. The kind of strong that came from lifting weights, but never testing it in real combat. His friends were hanging back, watching, ready to back whatever play he made. "You look lonely," the tall one said, leaning against the bar too close to her personal space. "Could use some company." His tone made it clear this wasn't a polite offer. Kira didn't look at him. She took a slow pull from her beer and kept her eyes on the mirror behind the bar, tracking all three men in the reflection. "I'm fine," she said. "Come on, don't be like that." He leaned closer. She could smell alcohol on his breath. "You look like you need to relax. Maybe forget about whatever's got you all tense." "I said I'm fine." His hand moved toward her shoulder. She shifted her weight, ready to move, but Kirsch was already coming down the bar. "Gentlemen," Kirsch said, his voice carrying that particular command authority that made junior enlisted straighten up automatically. "The lady said she's fine. Time to move along." The tall one straightened, turned to face Kirsch. "We're just being friendly." "You've been friendly. Now be somewhere else." For a moment, Kira thought they'd actually leave. Then the tall one smiled, and she knew this was about to get worse. "You know who I work for, old man?" He pulled out a contractor badge, flashed it. "Vanguard Solutions. We've got contracts all over this base. I'd hate for there to be any problems with your liquor license." Kirsch's expression didn't change. "That a threat? Just friendly advice." Kira's eyes locked on the badge. Vanguard Solutions. She looked up at the man's face, really looked at him for the first time. Square jaw, hard eyes, a scar along his left cheek that looked like shrapnel damage. "What's your name?" she asked. He turned back to her, surprised she'd spoken. "Wade Merrick. Why you interested now?" The world narrowed to a tunnel. Wade Merrick, the signature on Rourke's inspection report. The man who'd cleared a vehicle with failed brakes and sent 13 Rangers into Sangan to die. "I know that name," she said quietly. Merrick's smile widened. "Yeah, you follow defense contractors. I know you were in Sangan, 2017. His smile didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition. Calculation. "That's right. Did maintenance work. Good money, boring work." He leaned closer. "Why you lose someone there?" The question landed like a blade between her ribs. "Specialist Ethan Rourke," she said. "October 12, 2017. MRAP brake failure during contact." Merrick's smile turned cruel. "I remember that kid. Always bitching about equipment. Paranoid type. Guess paranoia doesn't stop brake failures, though." Kira's hands were shaking. She set her beer down carefully, precisely because if she didn't focus on something concrete, she was going to put her fist through his throat. "He died in my arms," she said. Her voice sounded far away, like someone else was speaking. His last words were about the brakes, about checking the hydraulics. "Tragic," Merrick said. His tone suggested it was anything but. "Combat's dangerous. Equipment fails. That's war." "You signed the inspection report. September 50, 2017. 27 days before he died. You cleared that vehicle despite the recall on the brake assemblies." Now Merrick's smile faded. His eyes went flat and cold. "You need to be careful making accusations," he said softly. "I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts." He reached out and grabbed her wrist. Hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to hurt. "Here's a fact," he said. "That kid wouldn't shut up about equipment problems. Always whining, filing reports, taking pictures, making everyone's life harder." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. Shame what happened to him. But maybe if he'd focused on being a soldier instead of a whistleblower, he'd still be alive. Kira looked down at his hand on her wrist, looked at the Vanguard Solutions badge still in his other hand, looked up at his face. "Let go of me," she said quietly. "Or what?" Behind Merrick, his two friends were moving closer. Kirsch was coming around the bar. The other patrons were starting to notice something was wrong. Last chance, Kira said. Let go of me. Walk away. Merrick's grip tightened. Make me. What happened next took exactly 17 seconds. Kira trapped his wrist with her left hand, rotated it outward in a textbook Aikido kotegaeshi, and drove her right palm into his elbow. The joint wasn't designed to bend that direction. Something popped. Merrick screamed. She released him and he staggered back, clutching his arm. The first friend, the one who'd been on her left, charged. Kira read the telegraphed haymaker, ducked under it, and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. The xiphoid processed a little piece of cartilage at the bottom of the sternum, hit it right in the diaphragm spasms, breathing stops. He dropped to his knees, wheezing. The second friend tried to grab her from behind, bear hug arms pinning hers. Amateur mistake. She dropped her weight, shifted her hips, and executed a hip throw that sent him over her shoulder. He hit the floor hard. Before he could recover, she drove her elbow into his face. Felt his nose break under the impact. Merrick was back on his feet, his damaged arm hanging useless, but his left hand was cocked back. He swung. Kira slipped inside his guard, too close for the punch to land with force, and drove her hammer fist into his throat, targeting the thyroid prominence, the Adam's apple. Controlled strike, just enough force to shut down breathing without crushing the trachea. Merrick dropped to his knees, gagging, unable to get air. The bar had gone completely silent. Every eye was on her. Somewhere in the back, someone was already on the phone with the MPs. Kira stood there breathing hard, her knuckles split and bleeding, her jaw already swelling from where Merrick's first punch had grazed her before she disabled him. Her hands were shaking from the adrenaline dump from muscle memory, from the part of her brain that was still in Sangan, pulling bodies from burning vehicles. Kirsch reached her first, put himself between her and the three contractors on the ground. Easy, he said softly. It's done, stand down. She looked at her hands, looked at Merrick gasping on the floor, looked at what she'd done in 17 seconds. This was what 8 years of trying to be normal had gotten her. This was what happened when you taught someone to be a weapon and then expected them to live in a world without wars. Merrick was pulling something from his pocket. Not a weapon. His contractor badge. He held it up, turned it over, showed her the back. Someone had written on it in black Sharpie 3 words that made her blood freeze. Rourke, Sangan, closed loop. He'd known. He'd known exactly who she was before he'd approached her. This wasn't a random drunk contractor harassing a woman at a bar. This was psychological warfare from someone who understood how combat trauma worked, who knew exactly which buttons to push. Merrick smiled through the pain blood on his teeth. You just fucked up Blackwood, he whispered. You know who I work for. You know what we can do. This isn't over. The MP sirens were getting closer. Kira stood there with split knuckles and Merrick's blood on her hands and the ghost of Ethan Rourke screaming in her head about failed hydraulics and promises she'd never been able to keep. The war wasn't over. It had just found a new battlefield. Staff Sergeant Vaughn Aldrich arrived with 2 junior MPs, took one look at the scene and sighed like a man who'd seen this movie too many times. 3 injured contractors, he said, scanning his notepad, all former military, all employed by Vanguard Solutions, all claiming assault by a female soldier. He looked at Kira. That would be you, Staff Sergeant Blackwood. Kira didn't answer. Kirsch had given her a bar towel filled with ice for her jaw. She pressed it against the swelling and watched Aldrich work. He was methodical, took statements from witnesses, reviewed the bar's security footage, talked quietly with Kirsch while his junior MP secured the scene and called for ambulances. Merrick was still on the ground, breathing easier now, but clutching his throat. His friends were sitting against the wall, one still wheezing, the other with blood streaming from his broken nose. They looked at Kira with the kind of hatred that came from humiliation. 3 former military contractors taken down in under 20 seconds by a woman half their size. Aldrich came over to Kira. He was 41, lean and weathered, with the eyes of someone who'd seen too much and learned to keep his opinions to himself. The security footage is interesting, he said. Shows you sitting at the bar, shows Merrick approach you, shows him grab your wrist. He paused. Then the footage gets corrupted. Technical glitch, apparently. Next clear frame shows all 3 contractors on the ground and you standing over them. Convenient, Kira said. Very. Aldrich pulled out his phone, showed her something on the screen. I pulled the full footage before it got corrupted. Saw everything. Saw Merrick grab you. Saw you defend yourself. Also saw him show you something on his badge that seemed to set you off. The back of his badge has writing on it. Rourke, Sangan, closed loop. Aldrich's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Who's Rourke? Specialist Ethan Rourke. Died in Sangan, October 2017. I was his medic. Merrick was the contractor who signed off on the MRAP inspection that cleared the vehicle despite recalled brake assemblies. That's a serious allegation. That's a documented fact. I found the records this morning. 17 FOBs, 34 casualties, 13 KIA. Every inspection report signed by Wade Merrick. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. Then he glanced at the contractors, at the other MPs, and leaned closer. You need to hear something off the record, he said quietly. I'm not who you think I am. I'm internal affairs. Been investigating Provost Marshal corruption for 8 months. Specifically investigating why certain investigations into contractor misconduct keep getting buried. Kira looked at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I just watched security footage of Wade Merrick deliberately provoking a combat veteran with PTSD by showing her evidence that he killed her friend. That's not assault, that's psychological torture. And the fact that the footage mysteriously corrupted tells me someone with system access is protecting him. Who? Deputy Provost Marshal Colonel Richard Frost. He's been receiving payments from Vanguard Solutions. $420,000 over the last 5 years through shell companies. Aldrich put his phone away. You just punched a hole in a conspiracy I've been chasing for almost a year. But if we move too fast, they'll bury everything and you'll take the fall. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you're about to be charged with assault. 3 counts. You'll be confined to base pending court-martial. It's going to look bad, but I need you to trust me. I need you to let this play out while I build the real case. And if you can't build the case, then you're facing a dishonorable discharge and possible prison time. He met her eyes. I'm asking you to be bait staff sergeant. I'm asking you to trust that I can protect you while I expose the people who got your friend killed. Kira thought about Rourke, thought about his last words, thought about 8 years of nightmares and guilt and the weight of promises she'd never been able to keep. What do you need me to do? Nothing, just be ready when I call. The ambulance has arrived. Merrick and his friends were loaded up, still glaring at Kira. Aldrich's junior MPs took her statement, confiscated her Glock as evidence, and informed her she was confined to base pending investigation. Kirsch watched from behind the bar as they let her out. He caught her eye and nodded once. A warrior's acknowledgement. She'd done what needed doing. The rest was just paperwork. Kira's apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Spartan, clean, a place to sleep, nothing more. She sat on the edge of her bed and looked at her split knuckles. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind the familiar emptiness. Her phone rang, her father. She answered. Hey, Dad? Kirsch called me. Garrett Blackwood's voice was steady calm, the voice of a man who'd spent 30 years leading Rangers through impossible situations. Told me what happened. Are you okay? 3 guys in the hospital. MPs charging me with assault. I'm confined to base. She paused. So no, not really okay. Kirsch had said one of them was Wade Merrick. You know that name, former Ranger. Got kicked out in 2009 for equipment theft. Word was he went contractor. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Kirsch also said Merrick deliberately provoked you. Something about Rourke. Kira told him everything. The brake assemblies, the inspection reports, the 34 casualties, Merrick's signature on every failed inspection, the writing on his badge. When she finished, her father was silent for so long, she thought the call had dropped. Dad, I'm coming down, he said finally. I'll be there in 2 hours. You don't need to. Yes, I do. His voice carried an edge she rarely heard. This isn't just about bar fight charges anymore. If Merrick deliberately sabotaged equipment that got soldiers killed, that's mass murder. And if he's being protected by people in the Provost Marshal's office, that's conspiracy. You're not facing this alone. The MP who arrested me, Aldrich, he said he's internal affairs, said he needs me to trust him while he builds a case. Do you trust him? Kira thought about Aldrich's eyes, about the way he'd shown her the footage before it disappeared. about the careful way he'd positioned himself between her and the system that wanted to bury her. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think he's the only shot we have at getting justice for Rourke. Then we'll trust him, but carefully." She heard him moving her keys jingle. "I'm leaving now. Don't talk to anyone until I get there. Not investigators, not JAG, no one. Understand?" "I understand." "Kira," her father's voice softened, "you did the right thing. Merrick wanted you to roll over. You didn't. That takes courage." She looked at her reflection in the dark window, saw a ghost staring back. "I'm tired of being courageous," she said quietly. "I just want to stop seeing Rourke's face every time I close my eyes." "I know, but the only way through this is forward. We finish what Rourke started. We expose what they did. We make sure no other families have to bury their sons because someone chose profit over honor." After they hung up, Kira sat in the dark and waited. Her knuckles ached. Her jaw throbbed. Her hands were finally steady. She pulled up the inspection reports on her laptop one more time, studied Wade Merrick's signature. 17 FOBs, 34 casualties, 13 dead soldiers. Ethan Rourke had tried to tell them. He'd documented the problems, filed the reports, taken the photos, and someone had killed him for it. Kira had spent 8 years trying to be normal, trying to transition, trying to build a life without wars. She was done trying. If they wanted a war, she'd give them one. Garrett Blackwood arrived at 02:30 hours. Kira heard his truck when he pulled into the parking lot, heard his boots on the stairs. He knocked once and let himself in with the spare key she'd given him years ago. He looked exactly the same as he always did. 58 years old, but built solid shoulders that still carried a ruck without complaint, eyes that missed nothing. He wore jeans and a simple jacket, but there was no mistaking what he was. Command Sergeant Major retired, 30 years as a Ranger. The kind of man who jumped into Grenada in 1983 and walked out of the Gulf War in 1991 with 3 Bronze Stars and a chest full of stories he'd never tell. He pulled Kira into a brief hard hug. Rangers didn't do emotional displays, but the hug said everything that needed saying. "Show me what you found," he said. She walked him through it. The brake assembly recalls, the inspection reports, the pattern of failures. Merrick's signature on every single document. Garrett studied the screen with the focus of a man who'd spent 30 years reading intelligence reports and terrain maps and casualty lists. When he finished, his jaw was tight. "This isn't negligence," he said. "This is deliberate." "I know." Merrick has EOD training, explosive ordnance disposal. He understands how equipment fails under stress. He'd know exactly where to cut corners to make it look like combat damage. "Why?" Kira asked. "Why would he do this?" "Money." Garrett pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. "Defense contractors make millions on maintenance contracts. But emergency replacement contracts, the ones that come through when equipment fail in theater, those pay 3, 4 times as much. Create the emergency, provide the solution. Basic economics." He killed 13 soldiers for money. He killed 13 soldiers for profit margin. Garrett's voice was flat cold. And if he's being protected by people in the provost marshal's office, that means the corruption goes deeper than just one contractor. There was a knock at the door. Garrett's hand moved automatically to his hip, where his concealed carry would be. Kira checked the peephole. Donovan Kirsch stood in the hallway alone. She opened the door. Kirsch nodded to Garrett. "CSM Blackwood. Been a long time." "No." "Kirsch," Garrett stood, shook his hand. "Heard you got out after 25. Didn't know you were running the Iron Anchor. Bought it with my retirement savings. Seemed like a good way to keep tabs on the base." Kirsch looked at Kira. "Came to tell you something. Something you need to hear before this goes any further." "What?" Kirsch pulled a folder from inside his jacket, set it on the table. Inside were investigation reports, maintenance logs, casualty documents. "I'm not just a retired SFC," he said. "I was CID, Criminal Investigation Command. Spent 15 years investigating everything from black market weapons to murder. Retired in 2015. Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Why didn't you mention that when we served together?" "CID doesn't advertise. We investigate soldiers. Means we don't make friends easily." Kirsch tapped the folder. "I've been tracking Vanguard Solutions for 4 years, since my son died." The room went very quiet. Corporal Nathan Kirsch, Donovan said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were haunted. Killed in Helmand Province, November 2013. MRAP rollover during a convoy. Official cause driver error combined with steering malfunction. He pulled out a photo, a young man in uniform smiling. He had his father's jaw. I didn't believe it, Kirsch continued. Nathan was one of the best drivers in his company, and the MRAP he was driving had just been serviced by Vanguard contractors 2 weeks before the rollover. I started digging. Found maintenance reports showing steering hydraulic issues noted during inspection, but marked as acceptable. Who signed the report? Kira asked, though she already knew. Wade Merrick. Garrett leaned forward. You've been investigating this for 4 years. What did you find? 41 equipment failure incidents between 2011 and 2017, 34 KIA, 73 WIA, all at phobies serviced by Vanguard Solutions, all with Merrick's signature on the inspection reports. Kirsch pulled out a map marked with red dots. I've documented everything. Dates, locations, part numbers, casualty reports. But every time I tried to bring it to CID or JAG, the investigations got shut down. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses transferred. It's been a wall for 4 years. Frost, Kira said, Deputy Provost Marshal. Aldrich said he's been taking payments from Vanguard. $420,000 that I can prove, Kersich said. Probably more that's hidden better. Frost has been blocking investigations, destroying evidence, and intimidating anyone who gets too close. He looked at Kira. Until tonight, until you put 3 Vanguard contractors in the hospital and force this into the open. Aldrich wants me to be bait, Kira said. Let them charge me with assault while he builds the real case. It's risky, Kirsch said. If Frost realizes what's happening, he'll bury you. Court-martial dishonorable discharge prison time. He's got the resources and the connections to make you disappear. Then we don't give him time to realize it, Garrett said. He started pacing. We move fast, build the case faster than they can react, get everything documented and locked down before they know what's happening. How? Kira asked. Old Ranger network. I've still got friends at JSOC, at the 82nd and CID, people who remember what it means to serve with honor. Garrett looked at Kirsch. You've got 4 years of evidence. I've got 30 years of connections. Between us, we can build an airtight case. And me, Kira asked. Both men looked at her. Kirsch spoke first. You keep doing what you're doing. Keep your head down. Follow orders. Let them think they've got you scared. Meanwhile, we work behind the scenes. I'm not good at keeping my head down. You're going to have to learn. Garrett's voice carried command authority. This isn't combat anymore. This is a different kind of war, one that requires patience in planning. Kira thought about Rourke, thought about his last words, thought about 8 years of nightmares and guilt. How long? She asked. Give me 2 weeks, Garrett said. 2 weeks to pull the records, contact the families, build the evidence. Then we go to Aldrich with everything. Force the issue before Frost can shut it down. 2 weeks is a long time when you are confined to base and facing court-martial charges. 2 weeks, her father repeated. You've survived worse. Kirsch gathered his folder. I'll coordinate with Garrett. We'll keep you updated. But Kira, you need to understand something. When this goes public, when we expose what Vanguard did, there will be consequences. For them, for Frost, maybe for you. What kind of consequences? The kind where powerful people lose everything. They're not going to go quietly. They're going to fight back with everything they have. Kira looked at her reflection in the dark window again, saw the ghost staring back, the ghost of a combat medic who'd spent 8 years carrying dead soldiers in her dreams. Let them fight, she said quietly. I've been fighting ghosts for 8 years. Fighting real people will be easier. After Kirsch left, Garrett stayed. They sat in silence for a while, the way soldiers do when words aren't enough. Finally, Garrett spoke. When I taught you to ruck march at 14, you remember what I told you. That pain is just information. That the only person responsible for my survival is me. That's right, but there's something else I should have taught you. Something I learned too late. He looked at her. Warriors aren't meant to fight alone. The Ranger Creed says it. Rangers lead the way, but we lead together. We fight together. We survive together. Dad, You've been carrying Rourke alone for 8 years, carrying the guilt, carrying the anger, carrying the promise you made to tell them what happened. But you don't have to carry it alone anymore. You've got me. You've got Kirsch. You've got Aldrich. We're in this together now. Kira felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd been holding tight since Sangan. I held him while he died, she said. Her voice broke. I did everything right, and he died anyway. And I couldn't make anyone listen. I couldn't make anyone care. I couldn't keep my promise. Garrett stood, pulled her up, wrapped her in a hug that felt like armor. You kept your promise, he said quietly. You're still fighting. You're still trying to tell them. And now we're going to make them listen. Not just for Rourke, for all of them. Every soldier who died because someone chose profit over honor. They stood there in the dark apartment, a father and daughter bound by blood and honor and the terrible weight of service. Outside, Fort Liberty slept. Inside, two warriors prepared for the kind of battle that doesn't get fought with weapons, the kind that gets fought with truth. The first 48 hours after the Iron Anchor incident passed in a gray fog of administrative limbo. Kira reported to Division Support Battalion each morning, sat at her desk processing requisitions she no longer cared about, and returned to her apartment each evening under the watchful eyes of MPs who made sure she stayed within base boundaries. Her Glock remained in evidence lockup. Her service record now carried the black mark of pending court-martial charges, 3 counts of assault, possible dishonorable discharge. The whispers followed her everywhere. But while the Army's bureaucratic machinery ground slowly toward her destruction, Garrett Blackwood moved fast. He'd spent 30 years building a network of Rangers who trusted him with their lives. Now he called in every favor activated, every contact pulled, every string he'd ever had access to. Within 72 hours, he had deployment records from 17 FOBs, maintenance logs from 2011 through 2017, and casualty reports that painted a picture even uglier than Kira's initial findings. The pattern was undeniable once you knew to look for it. Wade Merrick had visited 27 forward operating bases between 2014 and 2017. At each location, he conducted comprehensive equipment inspections for Vanguard Solutions. And at each location, within 30 to 50 days of his inspection, critical equipment failed. Brake systems, hydraulic lines, electrical harnesses, steering mechanisms. The kind of failures that killed soldiers. 41 documented incidents, 34 casualties, 13 confirmed KIA. Garrett spread the documents across Kira's kitchen table on the 4th night. Donovan Kirsch sat across from him, adding his own 4 years of investigation to the pile. Between them, they had enough evidence to hang Wade Merrick and everyone who'd protected him. The beauty of it, Kirsch said, his voice bitterer with admiration, is that it's almost impossible to prove sabotage after the fact. Equipment fails in combat zones. Stress heat, improvised explosive devices, enemy fire. Any defense attorney can argue that Merrick simply missed degradation during inspection. Negligence at worst. Except for the pattern, Garrett said. He tapped the map covered in red dots. 1 or 2 failures, that's bad luck. 41 failures, all within weeks of his inspections, all at different FOBs using different equipment from different supply chains. That's deliberate. Kira studied a casualty report. Corporal Michael Brennan killed when his MRAP steering locked during a firefight, causing the vehicle to crash into a drainage ditch. The impact broke his neck. He was 22 years old. How many families have you contacted? She asked. 18 so far, Garrett said. 15 are willing to provide statements. The others... He paused. The others took settlements from Vanguard. Non-disclosure agreements. They're scared to speak. Can we subpoena them? If this ever gets to trial. Kirsch pulled out his phone, showed them a text message. Aldrich says the Provost Marshal's office is pushing for a quick resolution. They want you to accept a plea deal. Reduction in rank, 6 months confinement, general discharge under other than honorable conditions. Which would eliminate my credibility as a witness, Kira said. Exactly. Convicted of assault, kicked out of the Army. Anything you say about Merrick becomes the bitter accusations of a disgraced soldier. Kirsch put his phone away. They're trying to neutralize you before we can build the case. How long until Aldrich moves? He needs 2 more weeks minimum. He's building a parallel investigation documenting the corruption in Frost's office. But he's one IA agent against an entire system designed to protect itself. Kira looked at her father. What if we don't wait 2 weeks? What if we force their hand now? How? Go public. Media. Everything we found. Let the court of public opinion do what the military courts won't. Garrett shook his head. That would compromise Aldrich's investigation, warned Frost. Give them time to destroy evidence and coordinate their defense. We'd get headlines for a week, and then it would disappear into the news cycle while they buried everything that mattered. So we just wait. Let them charge me. Let Merrick walk around free. We wait, her father said firmly, and we trust Aldrich. He's our best shot at justice that actually sticks. Trust. Kira had learned in Sangan that trust was a luxury warriors couldn't always afford. But she looked at her father's face, at the determination in Kirsch's eyes, and made the choice to believe. 2 weeks, she said. Then we move, whether Aldrich is ready or not. That night, alone in her apartment, Kira pulled up the database one more time. She'd been thinking about something Garrett had said, about patterns, about how 1 or 2 failures could be bad luck, but 41 was deliberate. She started digging deeper into her own deployment history. Her first tour, 2016 to 2017. 22 months attached to a mechanized infantry battalion operating out of Fobi B. Kashan in southern Helmand province. She remembered that deployment as relatively quiet. A few firefights, some IED scares. The usual stress of being downrange, but nothing catastrophic. Her unit had been lucky, except they hadn't been lucky. Not entirely. She found the incident report from January 2017. A convoy ambush on Route Bronze, the main supply road between Kashan and the district center. The lead vehicle's turret traverse mechanism had jammed during contact, leaving the gunner exposed and unable to return effective fire. The gunner specialist Timothy Walsh took shrapnel to the shoulder. Medevac to Kandahar, survived but lost partial use of his right arm. Kira had been in the trail vehicle. She remembered Walsh screaming over the radio about the jammed turret, remembered the controlled chaos of the ambush. She'd assumed the turret had taken a hit, that combat damage had caused the failure. But now she pulled the maintenance logs. FOB Kashan, December 2016. Comprehensive vehicle inspection conducted by Vanguard Solutions contractor team. Turret hydraulic systems marked acceptable, despite noted fluid leaks in the traverse mechanism. Signature line W. Merrick. 34 days before the ambush. 34 days before Tim Walsh lost the use of his arm. Kira's hands were shaking. She pulled up more records from that deployment. Found 3 other equipment failures. Generator collapse that left their aid station without power for 18 hours. Water purification system breakdown that forced them to rely on bottled water for 2 weeks. Communications array failure during a company-level operation. All within 6 weeks of Merrick's inspection, all marked as acceptable despite documented issues. He'd been trying to kill her soldiers since her first deployment. This wasn't just about Rourke. This wasn't just about 13 KIA. This was personal. This was Wade Merrick systematically sabotaging equipment, creating cascading failures, gambling with soldiers' lives for profit, and somewhere along the way, he decided to target her unit specifically. Why? She pulled up Merrick's service record from his time as a ranger. Dishonorably discharged 2009 for equipment theft. But before that, he'd been promising. High PT scores, good evaluations, recommended for scout selection. Then she found it. A letter of reprimand in his file from 2008. Merrick had been working in supply managing equipment distribution. A female sergeant had filed a complaint about missing night vision equipment. The investigation had found evidence that Merrick was selling gear on the black market. The female sergeant who'd reported him was commended for integrity. Her name was Staff Sergeant Jennifer Blackwood, Kira's mother. The room tilted. Kira steadied herself against the desk, breathing hard. Her mother had died in 2009 cancer when Kira was 12. But before that, Jennifer Blackwood had been an Army logistics sergeant. Garrison duty only, never deployed, but competent and principled. The kind of NCO who followed regulations and didn't tolerate corruption. She'd reported Wade Merrick for theft. Her report had triggered the investigation that ended his ranger career. And now, 15 years later, Merrick was sabotaging equipment that put Jennifer Blackwood's daughter at risk. This wasn't business. This was revenge. Kira called her father. It was 0200, but he answered on the first ring. Dad, Mom reported Wade Merrick in 2008. Equipment theft. It's in his service record. Silence on the line. Then Garrett's voice tight with controlled rage. I remember she came home upset, said she'd had to report a young ranger for stealing night vision equipment. Felt bad about ending his career, but knew it was the right thing to do. Merrick's been targeting my unit since 2016. Since my first deployment, 4 equipment failures at FOB Kashan, all within weeks of his inspections. He's been trying to kill my soldiers for 8 years, Dad, because Mom ended his ranger career. That's not just sabotage. That's premeditated targeting of specific units. It means we can prove intent. It's not negligence. It's not profit motive. It's attempted murder. Garrett was quiet. When he spoke again, his voice carried the cold precision of a man who'd spent 3 decades planning combat operations. This changes everything. If we can prove he specifically targeted your units, if we can establish motive beyond profit, we can break his defense before it starts. But Kira, this also means he's not done. If this is revenge, if this is personal, he's not going to stop just because you put him in the hospital. What do you mean? I mean Wade Merrick is escalating. First the taunt at the bar, then the badge with Rourke's name on it. He wanted you to know what he'd done. He wanted you to react. Now you've put him in the hospital and started an investigation. He's going to come back harder. Let him come. Kira. No, Dad, I'm tired of being defensive. I'm tired of reacting. Merrick wants to play psychological warfare, fine. Let's take the fight to him. Her father sighed. You sound like me at 28. It didn't always work out well. Yeah, but you're still here, and the people who came after you aren't. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't do anything stupid. Kira thought about Rourke dying in her arms, thought about Tim Walsh screaming over the radio, thought about her mother dead for 16 years but still reaching out from the grave to shape this war. I promise I'll be smart, she said. Careful is negotiable. The next morning, Kira reported to Division Support Battalion and found her desk had been moved. No explanation, just her computer terminal and files relocated to a corner office away from the main floor. Isolated, visible through glass walls to anyone walking past. The message was clear. You're being watched. She logged into her terminal and found her access to the logistics information warehouse had been restricted. She could view basic requisitions, but not historical records. Not maintenance logs, not deployment data. They were cutting her off from the evidence. Her supervisor, a major she barely knew, stopped by at 1,000 hours. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, I need you to focus on current requisitions only, no historical database queries. Orders from the Provost Marshal's office. Sir, my job requires access to historical records for cross-referencing. Your job right now is to process current requisitions. Nothing else. He walked away before she could respond. Kira sat at her terminal and breathed. 4 seconds in, hold 4, 4 seconds out. They were boxing her in, isolating her, making sure she couldn't build the case any further while they prepared their attack. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Having trouble with database access, meet me. Parking lot C, 1200 hours. Come alone. She deleted the text. Obvious trap. Wade Merrick or one of his people trying to get her off base away from witnesses. She wasn't that stupid. Her phone buzzed again. Same number. This time a photo. It showed her father's house in Virginia, taken from street level, Garrett's truck in the driveway, the kitchen window visible, Garrett himself visible through the window sitting at the table. The message below read, we can reach anyone, parking lot C, 1200 hours. Don't make us send a clearer message. Kira's blood went cold. This was escalation. This was Merrick's people threatening her father. Former Rangers knew how to conduct surveillance, knew how to get close to targets. If they could get a photo from the street, they could get close enough for worse. She forwarded the photo to Garrett with one word, compromised. His response came 30 seconds later. I see them. 2-man team in a Honda Civic, been there since 0900. Don't worry, I've handled worse. Then another text. Don't go to that meeting. It's a setup. But Kira was already standing up, already walking out of her office, already making the decision that would change everything. Because if Merrick wanted to threaten her father, if he wanted to escalate beyond bureaucratic games to physical intimidation, Then the gloves were off, and she was very, very good at fighting without gloves. Parking Lot C was on the southern edge of Fort Liberty near the old training facilities that hadn't been used since the base reorganization. Isolated, poor camera coverage. The kind of place where bad things could happen and no one would notice until too late. Kira arrived at 11:55 hours, 5 minutes early. Tactical advantage. She changed out of uniform into civilian clothes. Jeans, boots, a jacket loose enough to conceal the Benchmade folder in her pocket. Her Glock was still in evidence lockup, but she wasn't unarmed. A black SUV sat in the far corner of the lot. Tinted windows, Virginia plates. Expensive vehicle, the kind private contractors drove when they wanted to look professional but intimidating. Kira walked toward it, kept her hands visible, maintained situational awareness, noted the angles, the sight lines, the cover positions. If this went bad, she had two concrete barriers she could reach in 4 seconds and a drainage ditch that would provide defilade. The SUV's rear door opened. A man stepped out. Not Wade Merrick. Someone older, maybe 45, with silver hair and the build of someone who'd spent decades in special operations. He wore an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the shoulder holster underneath. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, thanks for coming. I didn't come because I wanted to. I came because you threatened my father. That wasn't a threat. That was a demonstration of capability. There's a difference, he gestured to the SUV. Get in. We need to talk. I'm fine talking right here. You really want to have this conversation in the open where anyone can see where the MPs doing their rounds might notice? Kira assessed him. Former military, definitely. Special forces, probably based on the bearing. Now corporate security for Vanguard. The kind of operator who transitioned from serving his country to serving whoever paid the most. She got in the SUV. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Two other men sat in the front seats. Both had the same operator look. The silver-haired man sat next to her, closed the door. My name's not important. What's important is that you understand the situation you're in. He pulled out a tablet, showed her a document. This is a settlement from Vanguard Solutions. $3.5 million tax-free. In exchange, you accept the plea deal on your assault charges. General discharge. NDA covering everything related to Wade Merrick and our operations in Afghanistan. You walk away. Start a new life. Forget all this unpleasantness. And if I refuse, then we proceed with Plan B, which involves your father having a very bad accident. Former Rangers die all the time. Training injuries, car crashes, heart attacks, 60-year-old men with combat trauma who's going to question it. Kira looked at him, looked at the casual way he delivered threats, looked at the tablet with its multi-million-dollar bribe. You know what the difference is between you and me, she asked quietly. What? You forgot why you put on the uniform in the first place. You forgot that some things matter more than money. You forgot that honor isn't negotiable. She grabbed the tablet and slammed it into his face. The edge caught, his nose broke it, blood sprayed. Before he could react, she had her Benchmade out and against his throat. Tell me where Merrick is. The driver was turning, reaching for a weapon. Kira pressed the knife harder against Silverhair's throat. Tell your boys to stay calm or I open your carotid. You'll bleed out in 90 seconds. I've watched it happen. It's not quick and it's not pretty. Silverhair raised his hand. The driver froze. Where's Merrick? Kira repeated. You're making a mistake. I've made lots of mistakes. This isn't one of them. Where is he, Tomum? Fort Liberty MRAP training course. Sector 7. He's been waiting for you. Of course he had. This whole thing, the meeting, the threats, the settlement offer, it was all designed to funnel her toward a specific location. Toward Wade Merrick. Toward whatever endgame he had planned. What's at the training course? A conversation, that's all. Wade wants to explain things to you, face to face. The last time Wade and I had a face-to-face conversation, he ended up on the floor choking on his own blood. This time will be different. This time he's brought friends. Kira held the knife steady for another 3 seconds. Then she pulled it back, opened the door, and stepped out of the SUV. Tell Merrick I'll be there at 1400 hours. Tell him to bring all the friends he wants. It won't matter. She walked away without looking back. Heard the SUV start here to drive off. pulled out her phone and called her father. Dad, they're trying to funnel me toward the MRAP training course. Merrick's there. They say he wants to talk. It's an ambush, Kira. Don't go. I'm going, but not alone. How fast can you get here? I'm 20 minutes out. I started driving when you forwarded that photo. Figured you'd do something stupid. I prefer to think of it as tactically aggressive. That's what stupid people call stupid decisions. His voice softened. Kira, if Merrick's at the training course with backup, you're walking into a kill box. Even with me there, we could be outnumbered and outgunned. Then we even the odds. Call Kirsch, call Aldrich. Get everyone you can to that location. If Merrick wants to have a conversation, let's make sure it's recorded. Let's make sure he confesses on camera. You want to wear a wire? I want to wear a body camera. Stream it to Aldrich's phone. If Merrick admits to sabotaging equipment, if he admits to killing Rourke and the others, we have him. Federal recording, admissible in court. Game over. Garrett was quiet. Then, that's actually smart, risky but smart. I learned from the best. No, you're crazier than I ever was. But okay, I'll coordinate with Aldrich and Kirsch. Meet me at the North Gate in 15 minutes. And Kira, yeah, if this goes sideways, if Merrick tries to kill you, you have my permission to defend yourself with extreme prejudice. I'll deal with the paperwork. Thanks, Dad. Love you too. She hung up and started walking. Her hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from anticipation, from the knowledge that this was it. This was the moment where everything either came together or fell apart. Wade Merrick wanted a conversation. Fine. She'd give him one, and she'd make sure the whole world heard every word. The MRAP training course occupied 50 acres of rough terrain on Fort Liberty's southern boundary. It had been built in 2008 to train crews on the mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles before deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan. Now it sat mostly abandoned, used occasionally for maintenance training, but otherwise forgotten. Perfect place for an ambush. Kira arrived at 13:55 hours in her father's truck. Garrett driving, Donovan Kirsch in the passenger seat, Kira in the back. She wore the body camera that Aldrich had provided, a small unit clipped to her jacket that looked like a phone camera, but recorded in high definition and streamed to an encrypted server. Aldrich himself was 5 miles away, monitoring the feed with 6 CID agents on standby. If things went wrong, they were 7 minutes out. 7 minutes was a long time in a gunfight, but it was better than nothing. You don't have to do this, Garrett said. He'd said it 3 times already. Yes, I do. For Rourke, for Walsh, for Nathan Kirsch, for all of them. Kirsch turned around. My son would have liked you. He had the same stubborn streak, the same need to fix things that were broken. Did it get him killed? No, Wade Merrick got him killed, just like Merrick killed Rourke, just like he's tried to kill dozens of others. You're not fixing what's broken, Kira. You're stopping a serial killer who happens to wear a contractor badge instead of a mask. The training course gate was open. Garrett drove through, slowly scanning for threats. The course was empty, or seemed empty. In this terrain, with the berms and obstacles and training structures, 100 people could be hiding, and you'd never see them until too late. They drove to the center of the course, to an open area surrounded by wrecked vehicles used for extraction training. Garrett parked the truck, left the engine running. Stay close to the vehicle, he told Kira. If shooting starts, get behind the engine block. It'll stop most rifle rounds. If shooting starts, we've already lost. This is about getting Merrick to confess, not getting into a firefight. Plans change. Garrett pulled a Glock 17 from under his seat, chambered around. But we adapt. Wade Merrick appeared from behind one of the wrecked MRAPs at exactly 1400 hours. He walked with a slight limp, favoring the leg Kira had kicked. His right arm was in a sling, the elbow sheet hyperextended, still healing. But he was smiling. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, punctual. I appreciate that in a soldier. Kira stepped away from the truck. Garrett and Kirsch stayed close but gave her space. You wanted to talk. I'm here. Talk. I wanted to explain things, to help you understand why you've been need to accept Vanguard's offer and walk away. I don't need your explanations. I need you to confess that you sabotaged equipment, that you killed Ethan Rourke and 12 other soldiers, that you've been targeting my unit since 2016 because my mother ended your Ranger career. Merrick's smile widened. You figured that out? I'm impressed. Yes, Jennifer Blackwood. Your mother. She couldn't mind her own business. Had to report me. Had to ruin my career. So I decided to return the favor. Ruin her legacy. Kill her daughter's soldiers. Make her daughter watch helplessly while equipment failed and warriors died. You're confessing, on camera, to multiple counts of murder. I'm explaining. There's a difference, Elm. See, here's what you do not understand. Vanguard Solutions is bigger than you, bigger than your father, bigger than some dead Rangers. We have contracts worth billions. We have connections in Congress, in the Pentagon, in the Provost Marshal's office. We own the investigation. We own the narrative. You owned it, Aldrich's voice came from behind them. He emerged from cover with 6 CID agents, all armed, all with weapons trained on Merrick. Past tense, because everything you just said was recorded and transmitted to DOD, Inspector General Army CID headquarters, and the FBI. You've just confessed to multiple counts of negligent homicide, sabotage of military equipment, and conspiracy to commit murder. Merrick's face drained of color. He looked around, saw the agents, saw the weapons. His hand moved toward his waistband. Don't, Garrett said. His Glock was already aimed at Merrick's center mass. You've lost. Accept it. I haven't lost anything. Colonel Frost will bury this. He always does. Colonel Frost was arrested 90 minutes ago, Aldrich said. Internal Affairs raid on his office. We seized his computer, his files, his phone records, showing $420,000 in payments from Vanguard shell companies. He's facing 20 years in federal prison for corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Merrick's hand was still moving toward his waistband. Kira saw it happening in slow motion, saw him making the decision to go down fighting rather than face trial, saw him pulling a weapon. She moved faster, closed the distance in 3 strides, intercepted his draw, trapped his wrist with her left hand, and drove her right fist into his throat. Not a controlled strike this time. Full force. The kind of blow that collapsed windpipes and ended fights. Merrick dropped to his knees, gagging the weapon falling from his hand. Kira picked it up. A Sig Sauer P226, standard contractor sidearm. She cleared it, locked the slide back, dropped the magazine. Then she crouched next to Merrick while he struggled to breathe. Ethan Rourke's last words were about the brakes, she said quietly. He knew you'd sabotage that vehicle. He tried to warn everyone, and you killed him for it. She leaned closer. But you made a mistake. You killed him in my arms. You made me watch, and you thought that would break me. Thought I'd carry that guilt forever and never fight back. Merrick's eyes were wide, panicked as his breathing came in ragged gasps. You were wrong. The guilt didn't break me. It forged me. Turned me into someone who would spend 8 years hunting for the truth. Someone who would take on a corrupt system. Someone who would put you on your knees in the dirt where you belong. She stood up. CID agents moved in cuffed. Merrick reared him his rights while he struggled to breathe. Aldrich approached Kira. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Bit of both, probably. We've got everything we need. His confession, the evidence you and your father compiled, Frost's financial records, testimony from 15 families. Wade Merrick is going to die in a military prison. What about Vanguard? Federal investigation launches tomorrow. Every contract they have ever had gets reviewed. Every inspection report gets forensic analysis. They're done. Garrett approached, put his hand on Kira's shoulder. You kept your promise. You told them what happened to Rourke. You made them listen. Kira watched the CID agents load Merrick into their vehicle, watched him look back at her with hatred and fear. This isn't over, she said. Merrick might be done, but Vanguard's going to fight back. They have billions at stake. They're not going to surrender quietly. Then we don't give them a choice, Kirsch said. He'd been standing back watching, but now he stepped forward. We take this public. Contact the families. Hold a press conference. Tell the whole story before Vanguard can spin it. That's dangerous, Aldrich warned. Going public before the investigation is complete could compromise the federal case. Or it could force everyone's hand, Garrett said. Make it impossible for anyone to bury this. Put so much spotlight on Vanguard that they can't operate in the shadows anymore. Kira looked at the 3 men who'd helped her get this far. Her father, Kirsch, Aldrich, 3 warriors who'd chosen to fight alongside her when they could have stayed safe. We go public, she decided. We tell Rourke's story. We tell all their stories. And we make sure everyone knows what Vanguard Solutions did in the name of profit. Aldrich sighed. You're going to make my job a lot harder. Yeah, but you knew that when you recruited me. Fair point. He started walking back to his vehicle, then turned. For what it's worth, Staff Sergeant Blackwood, your mother would be proud. She reported corruption even when it was dangerous. You finished what she started. After he left, Kira stood in the middle of the MRAP training course and looked at the wrecked vehicles around her. Training hulks meant to teach soldiers how to extract casualties from burning metal, how to save lives when everything was going wrong. She'd spent 8 years learning those lessons, learning how to pull people from the fire, learning how to keep fighting when the world was burning. Now she'd pulled Wade Merrick from the shadows, where he'd been hiding, dragged him into the light, made him face justice. But the fire wasn't out yet, not by a long shot. Vanguard Solutions was still operational, still had billions in contracts, still had lawyers and connections and resources that dwarfed anything Kira and her allies could muster. The real war was just beginning, but for the first time in 8 years, Kira felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The story broke on a Wednesday morning, exactly 72 hours after Wade Merrick's arrest. Not through official Army channels or carefully managed press releases, but through Rachel Rourke, Ethan's mother, standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, with Kira Blackwood beside her. 23 families stood behind them, parents, widows, children who'd lost fathers, all connected by the same thread of loss, the same pattern of corporate negligence disguised as combat casualties. Rachel Rourke was 51 years old, gray-haired and steady-voiced, a school teacher from Ohio who'd buried her son 8 years ago, believing he'd died a hero in combat. Now she spoke into a cluster of microphones while cameras recorded everything. My son wrote me a letter 3 weeks before he died, she said. Her voice didn't waver. He told me the vehicles weren't safe. He told me brake systems were failing. He told me he'd reported it multiple times and nothing was being done. Then he died in a vehicle that failed inspection, and the Army told me it was combat loss. IED attack. Bad luck. She held up a photograph. Ethan Rourke in uniform, 24 years old, smiling. The same photo Kira carried in her wallet. It wasn't bad luck. It was murder. Wade Merrick, a contractor for Vanguard Solutions, deliberately sabotaged equipment that killed my son and at least 12 other soldiers. He's been arrested. But Vanguard Solutions is still operating, still getting paid billions in taxpayer money, still putting soldiers at risk. That has to end today. Kira stepped forward. She wore her dress uniform, the silver star visible on her chest. The cameras focused on her. I held Specialist Rourke while he died. I did everything right and he died anyway because someone chose profit over honor. For 8 years, I thought I'd failed him. I thought if I'd been faster, better, more skilled, I could have saved him. But I couldn't save him because he was already dead the moment Wade Merrick signed that inspection report. She held up her own evidence. Inspection reports, maintenance logs, the documented pattern of failures. This isn't about one contractor. This is about a system that values contracts over lives, that protects corporations at the expense of soldiers, that buries truth when truth becomes inconvenient. Wade Merrick is in custody. Colonel Richard Frost is facing charges for corruption. But that's not enough. We need accountability at every level. We need Vanguard Solutions dissolved. We need new standards that prioritize soldier safety over corporate profits. We need to make sure no other family has to bury their child because someone cut corners for a bonus payment. The press conference lasted 45 minutes. Every major network carried it live. By noon, it was the lead story on every news website. By evening, members of Congress were demanding investigations. By the next morning, the Secretary of Defense was facing questions from reporters about how Vanguard Solutions had maintained contracts despite a documented pattern of equipment failures. The fire had started. Now it would burn until nothing was left but truth and ashes. Garrett watched the coverage from Kira's apartment. Kirsch sat beside him, both men silent, as the story exploded across every platform. Social media erupted. Veterans organizations issued statements of support. Defense contractors scrambled to distance themselves from Vanguard Solutions. You realize they're going to come after her now, Kirsch said quietly. Not physically. They're too smart for that after Merrick. But legally, financially, They'll try to destroy her credibility, paint her as unstable, make this about her PTSD instead of their negligence. Let them try, Garrett said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. Kira's got something they don't. She's got the truth, and she's got allies who won't abandon her when things get hard. The truth doesn't always win. No, but it's the only thing worth fighting for. Kira's phone rang constantly for 3 days. Reporters, lawyers, veterans wanting to share their stories. She ignored most of them, focused on the calls that mattered. Aldrich updating her on the federal investigation. The families coordinating their wrongful death lawsuits. JAG officers quietly reaching out to offer support. The assault charges against her remained pending, but nobody was talking about them anymore. Hard to prosecute a woman for self-defense when she'd just exposed a corporate conspiracy that killed 13 soldiers. On the 4th day after the press conference, Kira received a call from an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer. Then something made her pick up. Staff Sergeant Blackwood. The voice was female, professional, and careful. My name is Elizabeth Thornby. I'm a JAG officer assigned to the Vanguard investigation. I need to meet with you. There's something you need to see. They met at a coffee shop off base. Thornby was 39 with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd spent years prosecuting military cases. She set a folder on the table between them. I've been going through Vanguard's financial records, the payments to Colonel Frost, the shell companies, the contract structures. She opened the folder. There's a pattern that goes beyond equipment sabotage. Vanguard was running a blackmail operation. What kind of blackmail? They target veterans with classified service records, operations that were controversial or had complications. Then they create falsified after-action reports, add fake casualty data, and threaten to leak the documents unless the veterans cooperate. Pay them off. Testify in their favor. Pressure the military to maintain contracts. Kira felt cold. How many veterans? At least 60 that I can document. Probably more. Thornby pulled out a specific file. Your father is one of them. The world narrowed to a tunnel. Kira opened the file with shaking hands. Inside were documents about Operation Just Cause. Panama, December 1989. Garrett Blackwood's Ranger platoon tasked with securing Manuel Noriega's compound. The after-action report showed 14 civilian casualties during the breach. Rules of engagement violations. Possible war crimes. This is fake, Kira said. Her voice sounded distant. I know. The real AAR from 1990 shows 8 combatants killed all armed, all wearing civilian clothes over military uniforms. Standard false flag tactic by Noriega's forces. Your father's platoon followed ROE perfectly. But Vanguard created this version to use as leverage. Leverage for what? They approached your father 6 months ago, offered him a consulting contract. Very lucrative. In exchange, he'd provide expert testimony about equipment standards, help them defend against negligence claims. When he refused, they showed him the fake Panama documents, told him they'd leak them if he didn't cooperate. He never told me. He was trying to protect you, trying to handle it quietly. But then you started investigating. Merrick and Vanguard decided your father was more useful as a pressure point than as a consultant. Kira closed the file, looked at Thornby. Can you prove the documents are fake? Already have. Forensic analysis shows they were created in 2019 using modern software to mimic 1990 military document formatting. The real documents are in the National Archives, still classified, but accessible through proper channels. We've compared them. The Vanguard versions are complete fabrications. So my father's in the clear. Completely. In fact, his refusal to cooperate despite blackmail threats makes him a witness to Vanguard's criminal enterprise. He'll likely testify at their executives' trials. Relief flooded through Kira, then anger. They threatened my father with fake evidence. They tried to destroy his reputation, his legacy. They tried, they failed, because you exposed them before they could deploy their leverage. Thornby gathered the files. But Kira, you need to understand something. There are 59 other veterans who aren't in the clear. Veterans who did cooperate, who took their money, who testified in their favor. Some of them are guilty of nothing more than wanting to protect themselves. But some of them knew what Vanguard was doing and helped them do it. The investigation is going to get bigger, more complicated. more painful. Good. Let it get complicated. Let everyone who helped them face consequences. Thornby studied her. You really mean that? I held Ethan Rourke while he died. I watched him bleed out because someone chose profit over honor. Every person who helped Vanguard cover that up, who took their money, who looked the other way, they're all responsible. So yes, I mean it. Burn it all down. The federal investigation exploded outward like shrapnel. Every contract Vanguard Solutions had ever held got forensic review. Every inspection report underwent analysis. Every payment got traced through shell companies back to source accounts. The scope was staggering. Vanguard had operated in 17 countries over 12 years. They'd maintained equipment for every branch of the military. Their contracts totaled $4.7 billion. And underneath all of it, hidden in the complexity of corporate structures and offshore accounts, was systematic fraud on a scale that made the initial equipment sabotage look like small-time crime. Aldrich called Kira 2 weeks after the investigation began. We found something, he said. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Vanguard wasn't just sabotaging equipment to generate emergency replacement contracts. They were supplying substandard parts from the beginning, brake assemblies that failed quality testing, hydraulic lines made from inferior materials, electrical harnesses that couldn't handle combat loads. They'd buy cheap components, mark them up 300%, and sell them to the military as premium equipment. For how long? Since 2011, 14 years, billions in fraudulent billing. And here's the worst part. The quality failures weren't all accidental. Some were deliberate. They calculated an acceptable loss ratio. 3% equipment failure rate. Translated to casualties, that's acceptable losses. They gambled with soldiers' lives and decided 3% was the cost of doing business. Kira was silent. The math was too terrible to process. 3% of how many soldiers? How many deployments? How many missions? How many dead? She finally asked. 47 confirmed. Probably more that we can't definitively connect. 47 soldiers who died because Vanguard Solutions decided their lives were worth less than profit margin. Merrick killed 13. What about the other 34? Different contractors, different locations, but same corporate structure, same quality standards, same acceptable loss calculation. Aldrich paused. Kira Vanguard's CEO and 7 executives are facing federal RICO charges. Racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. They're looking at 25 years minimum. The company itself is being dissolved, assets liquidated. The wrongful death lawsuits alone will exceed $2 billion. Good. But there's something else, something you need to decide. Aldrich sounded careful now. The House Armed Services Committee wants you to testify. Full hearing, televised. They want you to explain what happened, to put a human face on the investigation, to make sure this leads to real reform. When from 3 weeks, Washington, D.C., you'd be under oath. Vanguard's lawyers will be there. They'll try to discredit you, attack your PTSD, question your memory, make this about you instead of them. Let them try. Kira, think about this. Testifying means reliving everything. Rourke's death, the investigation, the fight at the bar, all of it on national television. Are you ready for that? She thought about Rourke's last words, thought about the promise she'd made, thought about 47 soldiers who'd never get to tell their stories. I've been ready for 8 years. The 3 weeks before the hearing passed in a blur of preparation. Thornby coached Kira on testimony procedures. Garrett helped her organize the evidence into coherent narrative. Kirsch provided emotional support and reminded her that this wasn't just about punishment. It was about prevention, about making sure the next generation didn't face the same threats. The assault charges against Kira were quietly dropped. Self-defense ruling unanimous agreement from the Provost Marshal's office. Her service record was cleared. Her Glock returned from evidence. But the real victory came when the Secretary of Defense announced new equipment safety protocols. Independent third-party inspections, soldier-level reporting channels that bypass contractor influence, quarterly audits of all maintenance operations, whistleblower protections for anyone reporting defects. They called it the Ethan Rourke Memorial Equipment Safety Standard. Rachel Rourke called Kira the day the announcement was made. You kept your promise, she said. Her voice broke. You made his death mean something. He made his death mean something, Kira replied. He tried to warn everyone. I just made sure people listened. Will you come to Ohio before the hearing? I want you to meet his sister. She's been asking about you. Kira went, spent a weekend in Columbus with the Rourke family, met Ethan's sister Sarah, who was 21 now and studying medicine, met his father, a quiet man, who thanked Kira for not letting his son be forgotten, visited Ethan's grave at the local cemetery. She stood there alone after the family left, looking at the headstone. Ethan Michael Rourke, born 1993, died 2017, beloved son, brother, soldier. I'm going to Washington, she told the stone. I'm going to tell them what you tried to tell them. About the brakes, about the equipment, about everything. And they're going to listen this time, I promise. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a flag snapped on its pole. I wish you were here to see it, she whispered. You'd be proud of what we built from what you started. The new safety standards, the investigations, the families getting justice. It's not perfect, but it's better, and it's because of you. She placed her combat medic badge on the grave, the same one she'd worn in Sangan, the same one that had been on her chest when Rourke died in her arms. You don't need this anymore, she said, but I need to leave it here. Need to know that part of me is with you, the part that couldn't save you, the part that's been carrying you for 8 years. It can rest now. We both can. She stood there until the sun started setting. Then she walked back to her rental car where her father waited. You okay? Garrett asked. Yeah, I think I finally am. The House Armed Services Committee hearing room was designed to intimidate. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, rows of seats rising in tiers like a coliseum. At the front, a long table for witnesses. Behind them, a gallery packed with press families, veterans, and lawyers. Kira sat at the witness table in her dress uniform. The silver star caught the camera lights. Beside her sat Rachel Rourke, Donovan Kirsch, and representatives from 6 other families. Across the room, Vanguard's legal team watched with calculating eyes. The committee chairman, a senator from Texas with 30 years in Congress, opened the hearing. This committee convenes to investigate the systematic equipment failures that resulted in 47 combat casualties between 2011 and 2017, and to examine the role of Vanguard Solutions and other defense contractors in those failures. Staff Sergeant Kira Blackwood, you've been called to provide testimony about Specialist Ethan Rourke's death in the subsequent investigation. Please proceed. Kira leaned forward to the microphone. Her hands were steady, her voice was clear. Specialist Ethan Rourke died on October 12, 2017, in Sangin, Afghanistan. The official report says he died from injuries sustained during an IED attack complicated by equipment failure. That's true, but it's not complete truth. She pulled out the brake assembly, the actual failed component from Rourke's MRAP preserved as evidence, held it up for the cameras. This is a Max Pro MRAP brake master cylinder assembly, part number NSN 253001X6XXX. It was recalled in August 2016 for hydraulic line degradation. The recall order went out to every FOB in Afghanistan, but this assembly was never replaced. It stayed in service. And on September 15, 2017, Wade Merrick, a contractor for Vanguard Solutions, inspected this vehicle and marked it mission capable despite the recalled component. She set down the assembly, pulled up maintenance logs on the screen behind her. Merrick's inspection report noted fluid leaks in the brake lines, noted degradation in the hydraulic seals, but he marked them as acceptable. 27 days later, during a convoy operation in Sangan, those brakes failed. The vehicle couldn't stop when it needed to, couldn't maneuver when taking fire. And when an IED detonated near the convoy, the vehicle rolled into the blast radius instead of away from it. The room was completely silent. His final words weren't about the IED or the enemy fire. They were about the brakes, about the hydraulics. He knew the vehicle was compromised. He documented it, photographed it, reported it through proper channels. 27 days before his death, Wade Merrick reviewed those same reports and marked the vehicle mission capable anyway. That's not negligence, that's calculated murder. She paused, looked directly at the camera. Wade Merrick has been arrested. He confessed to deliberately sabotaging equipment at 27 FOBs. 41 equipment failures, 13 confirmed KIA. But Merrick didn't act alone. Vanguard Solutions created the system that rewarded his sabotage. They paid bonuses for fast inspections. They penalized contractors who failed too much equipment because failures meant delays and complaints. They calculated an acceptable loss ratio and decided that 3% soldier casualties were the cost of maintaining contracts. Rachel Rourke leaned forward to her microphone. Her voice carried the weight of 8 years of grief transformed into purpose. 3 weeks before my son died, I received his last letter home. He wrote about his platoon, his mission, his brothers in arms, but he also wrote something that haunts me. Mom, if something happens to me, don't let them say it was just bad luck. Make them check the equipment. Make them tell the truth. I didn't understand what he meant then. I understand now. He knew the vehicles were failing. He documented it. He reported it. And he died anyway because Wade Merrick decided profit mattered more than my son's life. I'm here to make sure Ethan's last request is honored. To make sure no other mother receives a letter like that and then a folded flag 6 weeks later. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Kira walked the committee through every piece of evidence, every inspection report, every casualty, the pattern of failures, the financial incentives, the corporate structure that prioritized profits over safety. Vanguard's lawyers tried to poke holes, questioned her PTSD, suggested her memory might be compromised, implied she was motivated by revenge rather than truth. She shut them down with cold precision. You want to talk about my PTSD? Fine. I have nightmares every night. I see Rourke's face. I hear his last words. I feel his pulse fade under my fingers. That's what your clients gave me. That's the cost of their profit margin. But my PD doesn't make me wrong. It makes me a witness. I was there. I saw what happened. I lived with the consequences while your clients cashed their bonus checks. The lead attorney tried one more angle. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, isn't it true that you assaulted Wade Merrick in a bar fight, that you put 3 men in the hospital? Yes, after Merrick deliberately provoked me by showing me evidence that he'd killed Specialist Rourke. After he grabbed me. After he made it clear he was proud of what he'd done. I defended myself. The charges were dropped. Self-defense. Unanimous ruling. But doesn't that suggest a pattern of violence? An inability to control? It suggests a pattern of responding to threats. Merrick threatened me with proof of murder. His associates threatened my father. If defending myself and my family from criminals makes me violent, then yes, I'm violent. But at least I'm violent in defense of honor. Your clients were violent in pursuit of profit. There's a difference, Ramirez. The lawyer sat down. The committee chairman nodded to Kira. Thank you for your testimony, Staff Sergeant. This committee will take everything you've presented under advisement. We'll be drafting legislation to reform contractor oversight and equipment safety standards. Your courage in exposing this conspiracy has likely saved countless lives. During the recess, as Kira stepped away from the witness table, Rachel Rourke approached her with an envelope. Yellowed paper-worn edges, the kind that had been handled many times over 8 years. I need to show you something, Rachel said quietly. Ethan's last letter, the one he sent 3 weeks before he died. I mentioned it during testimony, but I never told anyone what else was in it. She handed the envelope to Kira. Inside, 2 pages in Ethan's handwriting. The first page was what Rachel had described. Standard deployment letter. Missing home. Looking forward to leave. The second page was different. Mom, if you're reading this separately, it means something happened to me. I need you to find Staff Sergeant Kira Blackwood. She's the medic in my company. She's the toughest, most competent person I've ever served with. If I don't make it home, she'll make sure it matters. She doesn't quit. Ever. Tell her to check the brake assemblies on MRAP 724. Tell her to look at Merrick's inspection signatures. Tell her the truth matters more than the mission. She'll understand. She'll finish what I started. Kira's hands trembled as she read. 8 years ago, a dying soldier had trusted her with his last breath. But before that, he trusted her with his legacy. He knew, Kira whispered. He knew you'd find me. He knew you wouldn't let him be forgotten, Rachel said. He was right. That letter became Exhibit A7 in the federal case against Vanguard Solutions. Premeditated knowledge of equipment defects. documented attempts to report through proper channels, and a soldier's final request that someone with honor would finish his fight. Ethan Rourke hadn't just died trying to warn them. He died knowing someone would make them listen. After the hearing, Kira stood on the Capitol steps with the families. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The families held photos of their dead soldiers, a memorial on the steps of power. Garrett stood beside Kira, put his hand on her shoulder. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. "She reported corruption even when it was dangerous. You finished what she started. You took down an entire system. We're not done yet. The executives still face trial. The civil suits are still pending. Vanguard might be dissolved, but there are other contractors out there, other systems that need reform. That's not your fight alone anymore. You've started something. Now others will carry it forward." He looked at the families, at the reporters, at the crowd gathering. "You've built a movement. That's legacy. That's what lasts." The trials took 6 months. 7 Vanguard executives faced federal RICO charges. Wade Merrick faced 41 counts of negligent homicide sabotage and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The confessions recorded, the pattern documented, the financial incentives exposed, guilty verdicts on all counts. Merrick got life without parole at the United States Disciplinary Barracks, Fort Leavenworth. The executives got 20 to 30 years each in federal prison. Vanguard Solutions was dissolved, its assets liquidated. The wrongful death settlements totaled $2.8 billion. Every family received compensation. Every soldier's death was acknowledged as preventable negligence rather than combat casualty. The Ethan Rourke Memorial Equipment Safety Standard was implemented across all military branches. Independent inspections, soldier reporting channels, whistleblower protections, quarterly audits. In the 18 months after implementation, equipment-related casualties dropped to 0. 6 months after the trials, Kira Blackwood stood at the front of a classroom at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, Army Medical Department Center and School, Combat Medic Advanced Trauma Course. 60 students in front of her, all 68 whiskey specialists preparing to deploy. She ran them through a mass casualty scenario, simulated IED strike, multiple casualties, equipment failures, chaos. One student, Private Jonah Prescott, froze when his tourniquet failed during application. Panic set in, hands shaking. Kira stopped the scenario, walked to his side. "Breathe," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice she'd learned in Sangan. "Equipment fails. It's going to fail. That's not on you. What's on you is knowing what to do when it fails. So tell me, what do you do when your tourniquet doesn't work? Use a second one. That's right, always carry backup, always have redundancy, because equipment fails, leadership fails, command fails. The only thing you control is your training and your honor. So train until it's muscle memory. Operate with honor until it's your nature. And when everything goes wrong, when the equipment fails and the plan collapses and people are dying, you'll still be able to function because you'll have built a foundation that can't fail." She pulled out a photo, her medic team in Sangin 2017, Ethan Rourke in the center smiling. "This is Specialist Ethan Rourke. He died because equipment failed, because someone prioritized profit over safety, because the system valued contracts more than lives. But he didn't die for nothing. His death exposed a conspiracy, led to reforms, changed how we inspect equipment and protect soldiers. Every one of you is safer because he tried to warn everyone even when no one listened." The class was silent, respectful. "You'll carry gear that Specialist Rourke helped make safer. You'll follow protocols that his death helped create. And when you're downrange, when you're treating casualties, when you're holding someone while they bleed, and you're doing everything right, but it might not be enough, you'll remember that sometimes the system fails. But that doesn't mean you failed. It means you keep fighting to fix the system. Keep speaking truth even when it's dangerous. Keep honoring the fallen by making sure their deaths matter." After class, Private Prescott approached her. "Ma'am, my father served with your father in the Gulf War. He said Command Sergeant Major Blackwood was the toughest ranger he ever knew. Said he saved his life during a Scud attack." Kira smiled. "My father taught me that honor isn't about being perfect. It's about doing what's right even when it costs you everything. Is that why you exposed Vanguard, even though it could have ended your career. I exposed Vanguard because Specialist Rourke couldn't, because 47 soldiers couldn't, because someone had to speak for the dead. The career was never the important part. The truth was, do you still have nightmares about Specialist Rourke? Kira considered the question. Honest answer deserved honest question. Yes, but they're different now. Before I dreamed about failing him, about not being good enough, about watching him die and not being able to save him. Now I dream about him alive, about him knowing that his death led to change, about him watching other soldiers deploy with safer equipment because he tried to warn everyone. The nightmares haven't stopped, but they've transformed from trauma into legacy. The graduation ceremony for her first class happened on a Friday in October. 60 students received their combat medic certification. 60 warriors prepared to deploy and save lives. Garrett attended, sat in the back, watched his daughter lead the ceremony with the same command presence he'd tried to teach her since she was 14. After the ceremony, they walked the grounds together. "You're good at this," he said. "Teaching, building the next generation. It suits you." "It's not what I expected to do with my life." "The best things never are." He paused at a memorial plaque recently installed near the training facility. Read the inscription, "In memory of Specialist Ethan Rourke and all warriors lost to corruption. Their sacrifice demands our honor. Their truth demands our courage." Below it a quote, "The brakes failed, tell them." Specialist Ethan Rourke, October 12, 2017. "He'd be proud of you," Garrett said. "I hope so. I spent 8 years trying to keep a promise I made to a dying man. Sometimes I'm still not sure I did enough." You exposed a corporate conspiracy, took down a billion-dollar contractor, reformed military equipment standards, saved countless lives. That's not enough. It's enough for legacy. I don't know if it's enough for healing. Garrett looked at his daughter, saw the scars she carried, the visible ones and the deeper ones that would never fully fade. "Healing isn't about erasing the scars," he said. "It's about learning to carry them with purpose. You've done that. You've taken the worst thing that ever happened to you and transformed it into something that protects others. That's not just healing. That's honor." They stood there in silence as the sun set over Fort Sam Houston. In the distance, new students arrived for the next training cycle. The work continued. The mission never ended. But for the first time in 8 years, Kira Blackwood felt something close to peace. She visited Arlington National Cemetery one last time before returning to Fort Sam Houston permanently, Section 60, where the post-9/11 casualties were buried. Ethan Rourke's grave was easy to find. White marble headstone, clean lines, simple dignity. Someone had left flowers. Kira recognized Rachel Rourke's handwriting on the card. "Your death mattered. Your voice was heard. Rest now, my son." Kira knelt beside the grave, placed her hand on the stone. "Mission complete, Rourke. The brakes are fixed. The system is reformed. Merrick's in prison. Vanguard's destroyed. The safety standards carry your name. Every soldier who deploys from now on will be safer because you tried to warn everyone." The wind moved through the trees. Flags snapped on their poles. "I'm teaching now. Combat medics, showing them how to save lives when everything goes wrong. Telling them your story. Making sure they understand that honor means speaking truth even when the system doesn't want to hear it. You'd like them. They're good kids. Warriors. They'll carry forward what you started." She stood up, looked at the rows of white stones stretching into the distance. So many warriors. So many stories. So many lives that mattered. "I'm going to be okay," she said. "It took 8 years. It took a war with corporations and corruption and my own demons. But I'm going to be okay. Because of you. Because you gave me a mission. A purpose. A reason to keep fighting when everything said to quit." She stepped back, came to attention, rendered a slow, perfect salute. "Staff Sergeant Kira Blackwood, Combat Medic Instructor, Guardian of the Fallen, still standing, still fighting, still remembering." The salute held for 10 seconds. Then she lowered her hand, turned, and walked away. Behind her, the sun broke through the clouds and illuminated the white stones. Somewhere in the distance, taps played at another burial. The cycle continued. Warriors fell, warriors rose. Warriors carried forward the legacy of those who came before. Kira Blackwood had spent 8 years carrying the dead. Now she would spend the rest of her life making sure the living had the tools to survive. That was the iron cross she carried, the burden of leadership, the responsibility of truth, the promise made to a dying soldier that became a crusade for justice. She walked out of Arlington with her head high and her conscience clear. The war was over. The healing could begin. And somewhere in Sangin, in Helmand province in the mountains of Afghanistan, a burning MRAP still smoldered in memory. But now it burned with purpose, a beacon that warned others, a fire that illuminated corruption, a flame that transformed tragedy into legacy. Specialist Ethan Rourke had died trying to tell them about the breaks. Staff Sergeant Kira Blackwood had made sure the whole world heard his message. That was honor. That was justice. That was the iron cross they both carried, and it would never be put down.